As we got married, I was in law school. I was going to school for the first 5 years we were married, and she used to introduce me as, this is my husband who is in law school, and I'm looking forward to him graduating and supporting me in a manner to which I have not yet become accustomed. But I'm willing to adjust to. So we grew up in Grace Brethren churches. Her parents had started a Grace Brethren church in Mansfield, Ohio that used to meet in her home. And so there was one thing that we had in common was we agreed, theologically, doctrinally on everything. It was just never anything that we ever had to have a discussion about. And it was a real blessing. And we got involved in the church in Indianapolis. Then we moved to Columbus, and I got involved in the national men's leadership at the Grace Brethren National Conference. And in 2000 at the conference, it was in 2001. It was just a few weeks before 9/11. It was out in Anaheim, California. And I spoke on and it was a pretty well-attended seminar, probably the best attended one there. I have no idea why. And so I spoke to a couple hundred pastors and other leaders in the church about what I saw as the coming problem with postmodernism and the lack of being grounded in the truth. I was shocked, I must admit to you, I got pushback from some pastors that, John, you're against postmodernism. You don't understand. It's going to be a really good thing for the church. And I'm standing there like, I didn't say, are you an idiot every day of the week? Or are you just an idiot on vacation? Because it didn't make any sense to me. And I saw that this postmodernism in the emergent church that was starting was going to come. In fact, one of the examples I use is an example of a building in my hometown. This is the Wexner Center. You may have heard of Leslie Wexner, Victoria's Secret, Bath & Body Works founder, lives in Columbus. You may hear his name mentioned a lot in this Epstein scandal that's going on right now. A multi-billionaire. And this is the building that he donated money to build. It's called the Wexner Center for the Arts down at Ohio State University. And it's a postmodern building. And it doesn't make any sense. For example, there are parts of the building like, this is a flat walkway, but because of the way it's designed, it looks like it's going downhill. There's another place, there's even a staircase that doesn't go anywhere. Everything's disconnected. I think Ravi Zacharias even used this building as an example in one of his talks once where I saw the building, I talked to the architect, and I said, what were you trying to accomplish? He goes, well, I wasn't trying to accomplish anything. The building could be anything that you want it to be. And he said, when you designed the foundation, did you have that same design philosophy in mind? And because nobody does the foundation that way. So it was a building that really didn't make any sense. And then as I started looking at things and, looking at discernment issues, I was teaching an adult Bible fellowship in the church. I became aware of things like Rick Warren and Leadership Network and the Purpose-Driven Life and Peter Drucker and all of those things, because I was seeing throughout the Grace Brethren Fellowship, as I met pastors from all over the country, they were bringing all of this stuff into the church, and it was, in my view, it was toxic and it was destroying the foundations of the church. In my own church, I was an elder, was head of the elder board for many years, a large church, somewhere running in those days back around 4,000 to 5,000 people. I found out that the young adults, the singles, the college age, were having a convention, a weekend retreat, and they had invited a guy named Doug Padgett. Now, if you know anything about the emergent church, the big names in the emergent church have been Brian McLaren, Doug Padgett, and a number of others. And here was this guy who is a total, complete apostate coming to my church to teach singles and college-age people that I had taught. And I raised a stink. I sent an email to the executive pastor, the pastoral staff, and I went to the elder meeting the next night, and the executive pastor said to me, John, I got to tell you, John, I got your email, and, well, John, I felt like I'd been pulled over by the spiritual police. Is that what you think you are around here as a spiritual cop? And I said, based on what the Bible says an elder is to do, that's exactly what I am. And you should be too, and you shouldn't let this apostate come and teach children, young adults in this church. Well, he came. And from then on, things sort of started going downhill. We went through a pastoral change, and that pastor came. He was there a few years, and then he tragically died at the age of 60. And then we brought in another guy. And we brought in this other guy. He was a younger guy, 40. I had headed up the pastoral search committee on the first guy we brought in who passed away. But now, because I'm speaking out against these things, and I ran into a young pastor down in Virginia sometime in this time frame who was speaking out against what was going on in the Grace Brethren Fellowship. At the National Youth Conference, they were bringing in sometimes very questionable speakers. But then they also instituted a practice under the term of outreach where they would take the youth, the high school, middle school students at National Conference, and it's a big deal in the Grace Brethren Fellowship. There's like 3,000 people attend this thing. They would take them to a mosque, to a Hindu temple. And when you would go and you would look at the website of the Pittsburgh Mosque where they took them, and the website would say, boy, it was really great. These Christian leaders brought a whole group of young people here so we could tell them about Islam and convince them about the truth of Islam. They were taking us for fools, folks. And then this started seeping into my own church. One day, a young mother in the church called me, and she said, John, why is the senior class trip at the Christian high school, the largest one in Columbus that our church operated, why is the senior class trip a visit to a Hindu temple? And I'm like, what? I remember right in the highway out in the middle of the country where I was when I heard this, like, what? And she said, well, they did it last year too. So I sent an email to the pastor. This is the pastor who died. And within 5 weeks, he was dead. He had just entered the hospital. I never got a response. And then the following year when it came up that at the national conference, they were going to take the adults to a Hindu temple in Cincinnati. So it came up at the elder meeting, and they said, is anybody going to conference as an elder? You can be a delegate, and you can deduct your travel expenses and that sort of thing. And nobody said anything. There's about 40 guys there. And I said, I have no interest in going to a conference where a featured event is a visit to a Hindu temple. And all these other elders go, John, you're always saying this stuff. What is wrong with you? I said, what is wrong with me? This is the brochure. I had copies, and I passed them out. I said, this is going on. They go, well, this doesn't seem right. I said, well, if it doesn't seem right, why have the last 2 years our senior class at our high school at Worthington Christian gone to a Hindu temple? And they said, the executive pastor, the one who told me the spiritual cop, said, John, come on. You're making this up. You're always concerned about this stuff. And other people said, that would never happen at our Christian high school. Well, then one of the elders who was a teacher, an English teacher at the high school said, well, John's exactly right. That's what happened. So the former senior pastor at the time, he said, well, right now we're between senior pastors. So the older senior pastor said, well, I'm going to check it out. So he comes back, and we have an elder meeting a couple minutes later, and he says, hey, Jim, everybody goes, what about the Hindu temple thing? He goes, I went, and I think we should all go as a group of elders. And I'm like, Jim, are you kidding me? I said, well, I'll tell you what, folks. I have a class that I teach in this church, and I am going to speak out against this nonsense because it's unbiblical, it's not being done correctly, and it's destroying people's faith. Now, I want to vote right now if I should not speak out. I want everybody to speak up if I should not speak out. And 40 guys sat there and said nothing. Now, I will admit, over these years, I got a little bit more direct. About 2004, I had put a prophecy conference on at the church. Chuck Missler, Zola Levitt, Bill Koenig. And Bill Koenig said, well, you know, I do prophecy conference at Jack Hibbs Church at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills every now and then, David Hawking's conference, who I've known since I was, a young kid. And so I thought, well, we go out to Southern California. Pam's mom had remarried after her dad died, lived half the year out there, 15 minutes from Chino Hills. So we're going to go to the conference. And so for the next 10 years, 11 years, we probably missed one conference because we would go out there in the summer. And in that year, there was a speaker at the conference, this guy from Brooklyn, a little bit gruff. His name was Jacob Brash, I thought his name was. And guilty. But listen, my reaction was when I heard him speak was, where have you been all my life? Really? So to make a long story short, this started to lead to some concerns that I had. I was also on the board at Grace College and Seminary. Grace Seminary at one time was considered one of the top 2 evangelical seminaries in the world. Dallas, Grace, they were right up there. John Wickham, other faculty. But what I noticed was, through Steve Mitchell, who's now our pastor at Fellowship Bible Chapel, he was teaching a little church of like 35 people down in Roanoke, Virginia. Great teaching, putting up these little videos on YouTube every now and then, say, why are you guys doing this stuff? Fighting the inroads of Leadership Network in the district where he was, being people trying to get him put out of the district. One of the churches in the district was a test church for Willow Creek, one of 3 test churches that they use. And this little pastor of his little church, this is a big church, like 6,000 people. And he's like, you guys don't understand what you're doing, the philosophical underpinning. And they tried to kick him out of the fellowship. It was like, I have to tell you, it was almost like dealing with the Christian mafia in a way. Then Steve sort of picked up on some things about spiritual formation program at Grace Seminary. I was on the board. I started investigating it, and I must tell you, this spiritual formation program, they were using books, what's Agnes Sanford, The Green Room or something like that. Peter Scazzaro, The Emotionally Healthy Church, using all of this psychology and mysticism and really leading to contemplative prayer. And I was appalled. The professor came from Biola. She had been on the staff at Chuck Swindoll's church in Fullerton when he was out there. She had a PhD, and you can't be against a woman, right? I mean, that's just not, even 10 years ago, this was not allowed. So I eventually wrote a very long paper detailing my concerns with spiritual formation and where I saw the Grace Brethren Church, and I sent it to the administration at Grace College and Seminary, some of whom, like the current president, was my resident assistant when we were in college, and his wife was Pam's resident assistant. So we were these friends for 30, 40 years. And the reaction, and I sent it to all the pastors on the board, including my new senior pastor at our church, the older senior pastor who were also on the board, and a number of other pastors, not one of whom ever said a word to me about it, ever. The letter with exhibits was about 165 pages long. I'm an attorney. Okay. I don't know why they call what attorneys write briefs, because they are, I think it's shorter than what we would really talk about if we were allowed. And the reaction was, John, you don't know what you're talking about. While this is going on, although one professor at the seminary, a Bible professor, said, John makes some really good points, but I'm just a professor here. What do I have to say? And from then on, the dean of the seminary he wouldn't even look me in the eye. He would not acknowledge my existence at board meetings and that sort of thing. And our new pastor had come in August of 2011. And his first message, they had a sort of a dedication ceremony. And the first message the next Sunday was from John chapter 2, the story, the wedding at Cana of Galilee. And he got up. I saw the title in the bulletin. My jaw dropped. The title of this message on John chapter 2 was, Jesus is the life of the party. And I said, uh-oh. Now, I never spoke out publicly against him, but he was big into John Piper, Chuck Colson, and that type of thing. So I decided it's time for another prophecy conference. So I invited Gary Kaw. I invited Carol Matriciana to do an interview with her about spirituality and mysticism. And I invited Jacob Prasch. And coming in, I remember Jacob did an interview on the show, and there was a former Baptist pastor asking him on the radio show about things, and Jacob spoke about the purpose-driven life like he did today. And the interview was terminated almost immediately on a large radio station that I had a show on about 20 years ago for 6 months. And Jacob got up and preached at the conference. Gary Kaw got up and preached at the conference. Now, I didn't see the new senior pastor, but my people told me he's sitting in the back and he is freaking out. And then that proceeded to lead to attacks from the pulpit and that type of thing, with never mentioning my name or Jacob's or anything like this, but this extreme view that people have. And he just didn't have the courage to do it openly. Then they wanted me to meet with the elders, so they put in an executive committee. And one of the things that they did in this executive committee scenario is they wanted the elders to sign an affirmation statement. It had something in there about committing a certain level of giving, which I thought was decidedly unbiblical, and I told them. I refused to sign this thing for months and months, and then that we would never publicly disagree with another elder. And I'm like, why? So when we had a meeting about it, I asked the guy who was the head of the elder board after I was, and he was back now as the head of the elder board. I said, why did you come up with this? Why'd you put that statement in there? And it looked like a deer caught in the headlights. Look, I'm a lawyer, okay? I have taken thousands of depositions. I know when people are choking and don't know what to say. And he did not know what to say. It was like nobody said anybody would ask me a question about it like that. So I eventually modified mine and signed it. And then they started meeting with me, and I mentioned there that I was concerned about the preaching. It had deteriorated over years. It wasn't that it was false. It was just, I don't even know if it was skim milk at this point. It had no substance to it at all. Preachers are getting up there preaching 12-minute sermons. I can't even clear my throat in 12 minutes, as you probably know if you listen to me. So I said, yeah, I'm concerned about the preaching. So they have me meet with the new senior pastor, and he looked at me at this in the meeting, and he said to me, John, if you don't like it, why don't you just leave? And I said, I don't have children, Mike. You do. My church is the family, my family. And you want me to just pick up after 30 years and walk away from it? I said, what kind of monster are you, Mike? And he got up and walked out of the room. I don't know that we've ever talked since. So then they decided to bring me up on charges for the elders. And the charge was going to be first of all, they orchestrated it so they sent it to me after midnight on Resurrection Sunday for a Tuesday meeting, so I couldn't talk to anybody about it. They didn't tell me what I was charged with. So I went to the meeting with me against 40 guys. I said, what are the charges? John, you're divisive. So as we talk today about church for the churchless and some of the things that are facing, the situation of what happened to me at my church is not unusual. Part of this revolves around a complete misunderstanding and misinterpretation of what the Bible is talking about when it talks about divisive people. I'll share the verses with you in a moment, but I want to start this off with a video of a now disgraced pastor. This is from 2013 or 2014, James MacDonald. And James MacDonald had a network of churches all across the country, Harvest Bible Chapel, Harvest Chapel or Harvest Bible Chapel, I think it was. And they had all these pastors, and they had a big conference in a big church. And I've been to this church. It's, it's the old, some kind of like Home Depot store or something remodeled. So it's a big, big auditorium, several thousand, 4,000 people. And MacDonald starts at his conference, talks about getting rid of divisive people. Now, how many know the story of what's happened to James MacDonald? He was fired last year. He was making threats against people. They were kicking people out of the church. He was orchestrating, about a $1 or $1.2 million salary for himself. He bought a $2.5 million home, and the mortgage on the home just happened to be about $100,000 per year, and lo and behold, he got a $100,000 a year raise right around the time that he took out the mortgage. And he was bullying people. Look, Julie Roy's used to be on Moody Radio. She has done a great job of it. It's shocking. The church, when all of this started to go down, when this video clip came about, was about $78 million in debt. Process that. $78 million. So some opposition developed within Harvest Bible Fellowship among the elders against the conduct of James MacDonald. And so James took the opportunity at his conference with all the Harvest pastors there to say this about what he would like to see done.
Number 2, I secretly wish that these 2 verses were my elders' favorite verses. They're not my life verse, but I wish that my elders had these 2 verses for their favorites. One's from the pastoral epistles, where it says, reject a factious man after the second admonition. I wish that was my elders' life verse. How much heartache is caused in a church by elders that forbear for the sake of friendship with a factious man. Reject a factious man after the second admonition. Now, reject him doesn't mean he has to sit halfway back. Okay? Reject him means you can't come here anymore. Well, I'm sorry. Okay, that means you get to go to a different church. Reject. Do I need to spell that out? Why? That's so cold. It's so wise. How much heartache I could have saved our church over the last 2 decades if I had lowered my expectation of my ability to change the behavior of others and raised my expectation that people will be as they have been. A factious man is a danger to the church, and you are released by Scripture to release him. And I'm releasing you to take a small portion of your church's budget, build a catapult, put it in the church parking lot, and load it regularly. I think we can shoot this one right out of our county. All right?
All right. One of the most popular teachers in America. I forget the name of his radio program that he used to have. Get rid of him. Well, there were some elders at the time who were speaking out against what MacDonald was doing. And like the church where we went, where they wanted elders never to disagree with another, these elders were disagreeing, and they were kicked out of the church. And so a Sunday came after that they had been booted from the church and told never come back here again. And this is an audio clip that they played in church that Sunday.
I just want to remind you that God has entrusted spiritual authority to the local church, and every local church has an authority under God. We believe that the Bible teaches that the authority of the church is vested in the elders. And when the elders speak collectively in agreement, they speak for God to our church. That's about as serious gets. And here are 4 of the elders in our church that have a message for us that we would do well to take heed to. So listen very carefully. These 4 men are speaking on behalf of the entire elder board of our church on every campus. Listen now.
All but one member meeting is successfully behind us, but we come to you today further fulfilling our pledge of greater transparency with a sad but necessary message from our entire elder board of our church. We need to communicate with you regarding the discipline of 2 former elders and their combined effort with other former elders all outside Harvest, working to discredit our elder board and destroy our pastor.
3 elders that broke with the rest of our 30-member elder board in June have continued to spread discord through their false and unrelenting viewpoint. That was unanimously rejected by the elders over many months and with finality in our June meeting. They made their point, we rejected their opinions, but they refused to submit to elder consensus, choosing instead to sow discord and create division.
You hear the term elder consensus.
This is a very, very serious sin, one we are told in Proverbs 6 that our Lord hates.
This week, the elders received a letter with 13 accusations against our pastor and his integrity, all of which the elders have already unanimously rejected multiple times. Nothing new, just a continued refusal to accept the consensus of the elders of Harvest Bible Chapel. If these men would express even a fraction of the constant and ongoing grace and humility that we see so frequently in our pastor, they can move beyond their bitterness to healing. Their current refusal to do so is defiling many people, and that is great sin.
Scott Phelps and Barry Slaybaugh have been notified that they are under church discipline and no longer welcome in our church until they repent. A copy of our board resolution.
So this is going to be, again, this is going to be part of our prophecy update, and I apologize for the slide. I'll send you another one, Josh. It's really over. You understand that? It's really over. As you know, some of you listen to the prophecy updates that I do, and I try to do a mix of what's going on in the church, culture, geopolitics, and that type of thing, because I think all of these are integrated as a whole, and we'll see developments on all of them as we approach the end times. Well, as we get closer to the end of the end times and the return of Jesus Christ, I think we are in the end times. And again, we talk about this convergence of all of these things happening all at once. So here is the verse that MacDonald was reading to the group of pastors at Harvest. Now, can I update you on the story? Those elders last year, when MacDonald was fired, apologized to the elders that they were excoriating in that video. It took them 5 years. And what those elders had brought up was not opinion, it was fact. And it is now established fact. What they did to those men was atrocious. It is why people leave churches that have bullies instead of pastors. That was not a shepherd that talked about building a catapult in the parking lot. Ha, ha, ha. Having been through something similar, I will tell you that it still upsets me. I hope you can get that. So MacDonald's verse, so let's look at whether MacDonald was actually interpreting Scripture correctly. when he said this, but avoid foolish controversies. This is Titus chapter 3, one of the pastoral epistles, but avoid foolish controversies and genealogies and strife and disputes about the law, for they are unprofitable and worthless. Reject a factious man after the first and second warning, knowing that such a man is perverted and is sinning, being self-condemned. The King James interprets it. The word there is hieretikos, heretic. It's the Greek word for heretic, and that's what the King James says. A man that is an heretic, reject. People who disagree with another elder are not, under the scriptural test, divisive. They are only divisive if they are teaching false doctrine, if they are twisting scripture, like someone who says, if you disagree with the other elder consensus, you're divisive. That is not the biblical test. Ever. It has never been. It is false teaching. That is picked up in Romans chapter 16. Now I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause divisions. Now, a lot of people, when I've seen pastors talk on this, they stop. Remember last night I told Jesus he stopped at the end, in the middle of Isaiah 61, because he didn't want to talk about the prophecies that were still yet future. He was talking about the ones that have been fulfilled from Isaiah. And so what the pastors do, I guess they figure, well, we can do that whenever we want. We just stop in the middle of the verse. But it identifies in Romans chapter 16 what the divisions are. And offenses contrary to the doctrine which you have learned, and avoid them. Not the people who point out false teaching. They're not the divisive ones. It's the divisive ones that do things that bring emergent church leaders into a church to speak and that sort of thing. That's the divisive person that you're to avoid. And so what we have seen is we are in this time where scripture is being taken and flipped upside down. And it is the fulfillment of prophecy. And I fear, my friends, it's only going to get worse. And I have some examples that I will share with you today. So contrary to the doctrine, that is the test of divisiveness. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, I'm sorry I have the wrong reference here. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith. Depart from the faith. That seems to imply they were part of the faith before. Giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron. Paul continues this in 1 Timothy, again, I think this is 2 Timothy 4. I apologize, I was putting this together very quickly. This know also that in the last days perilous times will come. So, how do you know if you're in the last days? Are the times perilous? I don't think there's any person that's thinking about it that can conclude anything else when we see what's going on. 2 Timothy 4, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. Now those fables are going to come in many, many different kinds, many different manifestations. It might be twisting scripture. It might be nonsense like there are, I don't know what the number is, 102, 67, I've seen genders. These are fables. These are modern fables. They aren't based on science. They're anti-science. You know this instinctively. One of the things that's led to this is the growth of mysticism in the church. One of the people that brought this in was a guy named Thomas Merton. He died in 1968 at the age of 53. He was a Cistercian monk at a monastery outside Louisville, Kentucky. He was more Buddhist than Catholic. And I only pointed out, he died in 1968. He had written some books on spirituality and mysticism. When he died, they put his obituary on the front page of the New York Times. Don't tell me that this man did not have influence. By the way, right above it is another person who had a lot of influence, not good on Christianity, Karl Barth, who died at the same time, around the same time. Merton died. He reached for a lamp at a monastery and he was electrocuted. He was 53. But he has been very influential. Here's a little video about him.
Once the nightclubs of New York had been his haunt. Then he became a Trappist monk living in rural Kentucky. Though in seclusion for 27 years, he had become recognized internationally as a spiritual master. Admirers celebrated him.
Merton was what we would call a seer. He saw at a higher level, and that's why a lot of his books, 40 years later, are still current, 50 years, 60 years later, particularly in the rediscovery of the contemplative tradition. He almost reintroduced the word. He pulled back the veil and retrieved it for us.
Others labeled Merton a radical, a renegade who was leading faithful readers astray.
When I told my pastor, the church I was at in Cleveland, that Merton had died, he says, well, maybe God took him so he couldn't do any more harm.
As 1968 begins, Merton is living as a hermit. From his home in the Kentucky woods, his writing on spiritual matters, social justice issues, and cultural concerns reaches a readership of millions.
I have a past to break with. An accumulation of inertia, waste, junk. A great need of clarification, of mindfulness, or rather of no mind. A need for the Spirit.
A part of Merton's restlessness is a desire to communicate one-on-one with Asian spiritual practitioners. He has come to see going beyond the divisions of West and East as the defining work of his life. Now, in October of 1968, Merton does go to Asia, a pilgrim seeking insight and communion.
So he came to see us, India, and then he went to Thailand. This time, this moment, very, very important. Closer contact. Now, as a result of sort of closer relation, they automatically, mutual respect automatically come. So I often describe him as a very, very strong bridge between Catholic monk, Catholic tradition, and Buddhist tradition.
This is Thomas Merton. I'm now going to play you a video clip of a young lady named Phileena Hurwitz, who runs, it's something like social action through contemplation. Her husband is Christopher Hurwitz. She spoke a few years ago at the Catalyst Conference put on by Andy Stanley's organization and led them in contemplative prayer. I have videos of her speaking at evangelical colleges like Biola, in Chapel. I have her speaking. The video clip you will see is a video of her speaking at Taylor University a few years ago. A conservative evangelical college, we are led to believe. She said she grew up evangelical, and now she says, she has this kind of, I call her, you can edit this out, one of the mystic chicks that seem to be influencing evangelicalism, and she has this kind of Southern California surfer dude, like, God, I used to be evangelical, and then I'm Catholic now, and that type of thing. You can watch the videos, they're online. But she's going to identify the influences in this contemplative prayer and mysticism.
Whatever the case, contemplative spirituality, tried and traditional contemplative prayer practices marked by solitude, silence, and stillness are absolutely imperative for serious followers of Christ. Learning to pray with your whole self beyond words and thoughts catalyzes transformation and liberation. Contemplative spirituality is nothing new. It's actually very old and has been recovered for our time over the past 50 years or so by courageous monks like Thomas Merton, Thomas Keating, John Maine, Bede Griffiths, and the friar Richard Rohr. Contemplative.
Okay, so let me just sort of summarize the people that Richard Rohr, Thomas Keating, Merton. Okay, so here's sort of a summary. Heretic, 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 heretic. Empty the mind is what they say we should do. The interesting thing was when she spoke at the 2014 Catalyst Conference in Dallas, somebody sent me the experience kit that they have. And in the experience kit was a coupon. Here is a coupon so that you church leaders can go home and have 3 of your people do the Enneagram analysis. How many of you even heard of the Enneagram? It's sweeping over evangelicalism like a tsunami right now. Andy Stanley's doing podcasts on it. A month ago at Liberty University, the largest Christian college in the world, university in the world, they did an 1.5-hour chapel convocation on the Enneagram. It is not scriptural. It is New Age. It is occultic, and pastors and churches are falling for it. In the secular world, they gave up on this thing a long time ago because it wasn't valid. But boy, that doesn't stop us great enlightened evangelicals from picking up on what the world's rejected. I only bring this up because I want you to understand we are living, oh, by the way, one of the leading books on the Enneagram was by Phileena, her husband. And so when she speaks of Catalyst, they're pushing the Enneagram, and I think there's a clear connection there. And I only bring this up because when the scripture tells us you will live in perilous times, theologically, doctrinally, we're there. It didn't die with Thomas Merton 51 years ago. It's you know who the other one you saw the bald-headed guy in the video talking about how great Merton was? That was Richard Rohr. He lives in Albuquerque, has a retreat around Albuquerque, New Mexico. He's a Buddhist / Catholic / mystic, whatever, heretic. And he's pushing the Enneagram. Everybody is citing to Richard Rohr and mysticism. Rob Bell loved Richard Rohr. Brian McLaren loves Richard Rohr. And I guess you would love him if you've emptied your mind of all reason and thought and ability to think. And they're falling for it. If I could climb up that sign out there and shout it, I would. This is killing the church. People will depart from the faith through nonsense like this. It's so easy. The simplicity of the gospel, and yet we're ripping people's faith away from them through this stuff. Empty the mind, stillness. Well, when you empty the mind, it gets filled up. Nature abhors a vacuum, and it gets filled up with a lot of mental sewage, I guess is the best way I could. You know what I'm talking about. Thank you. It is satanic. It's demonic. And people are opening themselves up to this all over the place. And leading evangelicals, Andy Stanley, Matt Chandler, other people. I mentioned Matt Chandler. Somebody gets on, I can't believe you spoke against Matt Chandler like this. I don't believe he's doing it. Go to Amazon, look up a book on marriage and Enneagram, endorsed by Matt Chandler. Big paragraph on the back, Matt Chandler and his wife. They're all pushing this. So I understand why people leave churches. Sometimes you take a stand and you're forced out. Look, I will tell you this, and I sort of speak from personal experience here. We left. We were told to leave. And it wasn't easy. And this was the people we had worshiped with and served with for almost 3 decades. And I was told to resign from the board of the college and seminary, and I did. And there are a few friends like Jacob and some others that were very, very, very helpful in reaching out to us at that time. But there's also good news. So this is going to be sort of a little bit of a prophecy update. And I don't know what time I'm supposed to quit, but you know what? I don't really care right now. But there's a few things I want to talk about. A former cop went in the wrong apartment. She was confronted by someone. She shot and killed the man, and she was convicted of murder this week. And at the sentencing hearing, the brother of the man that she killed had this to say. This is amazing, I think.
I'm not gonna say I hope you rot and die just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. And I wasn't gonna ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you, because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ. I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
Well, the story doesn't end there. Somebody saw the video, one of these social justice warrior apostate pastors, and said, well, what I saw go on there, that was post-traumatic slavery syndrome. Can you believe that? One of the greatest demonstrations of the love of Jesus I have ever seen in my life. And this fool, this moron, says he turns it into a racial justice issue. People are losing their minds, my friends. Somebody responded to that and said, this is the gospel-denying poison of woke Christianity. This young man forgives his brother's killer because gospel grace has freed him from bitterness. And in Isaiah 5:20 fashion, this so-called bishop calls it slavery. You know, when I do these things each week, I have like a stack of stuff that never gets into it. And I know I talk to Jacob, he does prophecy updates. I know Marco does them. And when we get together, it's always like, I can't keep up with everything that's going on. It's shocking. That's not the end of the story, though. There's even more. The judge walked up to the guy in the courtroom and gave him a Bible. This is the video of the judge giving him a Bible. Or giving her a Bible, I'm sorry, the convicted murderer. She said, look, I got 3 or 4 more at home. I want you to take this one with you when you go to prison. Now, I've been a lawyer a long time. I've never seen anything like this. There was a real God thing going on in that courtroom. And when we see it, we should acknowledge it. No, I don't know her theology. I don't know his theology or anything like that. I know what they did. But guess what? The judge is in all kinds of trouble. Separation of church and state. New York Times, CNN, Freedom for Religion Foundation, saying that she shouldn't have done this. This is a violation of the Constitution. I don't care. Get over yourself. Prison in Louisiana, where they've put in things like Bible studies and that type of thing. It was in Gilroy Prison. It was one of the worst prisons in the world for violence, rape, and it's changed because of the power of the Word of God and the gospel in men's lives. Yet these people want to go, well, you can't do that. Oh my goodness, you can't give them a Bible. That's offensive to me. When we look around the world, another thing we see violence everywhere. Here's some riots, more riots going on in Hong Kong, that type of thing. The New York Commission on Human Rights, though, they have the solution. They came out with a press release and a guidance this week. The New York Commission on Human Rights announces new legal enforcement guidance and actions against discrimination based on immigration status and national origin. And it says this: the guidance states that the use of the term illegal alien, among others, when used with the intent to demean, humiliate, or harass a person, is legal under the law. And you can't threaten to call the immigration authorities. That's against the law. They came out with a 29-page guidance. The use of certain language, including illegal alien and illegals, with the intent to demean, humiliate, or offend a person or persons constitutes discrimination under the New York human rights law, with a fine of up to $250,000 per violation. It's an attack on free speech. The Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission of the Southern Baptists came out with a guidance, Faith and Healthy Democracy guidance that was just published within the last week or so. That's Russell Moore, one of these woke evangelicals that's always starting now to push neo-Marxist social justice agenda in the church. Used to be an aide to a Democratic congressman. It says here, this is a quote from the article, at its best, social media is a publishing platform for those overlooked by traditional media. It amplifies voices typically not heard on mainstream television or radio. In some cases, social media watchdogs have helped hold mainstream media accountable for factual accuracy or for the choices in what gets covered. Finally, social media also helps us find and form connections with others. It democratizes the power of networking and enables non-elites to form communities of interest. So what do you think their recommendations were when they get down to the end of this report? Stay away from social media and read mainstream print newspapers. Because that's where you'll get the truth, right? I had to put this in because I'm standing in a country where I think you're undergoing an election. This is on a blog that I read called Hot Air. Justin Trudeau, I was wrong to say I was pro-choice, but against abortion. That's not for me as a man to say. Am I allowed to? This is just a question. Could I ask the question like, does he identify as a man? I consider him the female version of Cortez, the AOC congresswoman that we have. Who knows what they're going to see. This is from England. I'll spend a little bit of time on this. This is a headline in the New York Times. He said no to preferred pronouns. They said he didn't have a case. This is a doctor. He was an intake officer. He was meeting with a person, clearly a male, and he said the person wanted to be referred to as they. He said, I'm not going to do that. You're he. And he got in trouble for it. There was a court case. It's made its way through the court process, and he's now out of a job. Worked for a social agency in the UK for 30 years, roughly. A doctor. I think a PhD doctor, but I'm not sure about that. And here's what this is. So I dug out the actual decision, the employment tribunal decision, final merits hearing, just issued the other day. He relies cumulatively or alternatively on the following religious and or philosophical beliefs. Look at this. His belief in the truth of the Bible, and in particular the truth of Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. The court then says, it follows that every person is created by God as either male or female. A person cannot change their sex, gender as well. Any attempt or preference in doing so is pointless, self-destructive, and sinful. That's a summary of his position. And he just says, look, nobody has ever changed their biological sex. It hasn't happened. Might change the external manifestations of it. Bruce Jenner might hit from the ladies' tees now instead of the boys' tees. But he's still the male who won the decathlon in the 1972 Olympics. You're never going to change that fact. It's a fiction. It's anti-science. So here's some of the conclusions of the court. We find, however, sensitively, those matters that were handled, that the triaging suggested by Dr. Makareth, the one who was fired, would have violated the dignity of a transgender individual and or the prescribed environment such that the treatment of the service user constituted harassment. And it reviews the European Commission statement, and you need to understand this because I think it's happened here in Canada, it's coming in the United States. The EU recognizes a freedom of religion, meaning a freedom of belief. Our Constitution says, you can act out your faith. The EU says, no, you can hold it, but keep it to yourselves, okay? Don't care what Jesus said about the Great Commission or anything like that. Just, you believe it, that's fine. Don't tell anybody. This is where it's going and where it's already going. So here, it says here, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief in freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief. It just occurs to me, that's very sexist of them to say, to manifest his religion or belief. I'm bringing them up on charges. And then here in part 2, freedom to manifest one's religion or beliefs shall be subject only to such limitations as prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society in the interest of public safety, for the protection of public order, health, or morals, or for the protection of rights and freedoms of others. And then goes to cite a Granger case, and it just says, listen, you can hold a belief, but you're just not allowed to act on it publicly if it violates our public policy, which is really no religious freedom at all. Would you agree? So it says, look, Christianity falls within this. We accept the belief in Genesis 21, lack of belief in transgenderism, and conscientious objection to transgenderism are genuinely held, and that the belief in Genesis 1:27 is his valid belief. But irrespective of our determinations above, all three heads, all three judges, belief in Genesis 1:27, lack of belief in transgenderism, and conscientious objection to transgenderism in our judgment are incompatible with human dignity and conflict with the fundamental rights of others, specifically here, transgender individuals. So, it's over in some respects. And this will lead to persecution, and Peter says we should joy in our suffering for the Lord. And we need to sort of recapture that. Makareth said, listen, I'm not alone in being concerned by this. This is the doctor. I'm not alone in being deeply concerned by this outcome. Staff in the NHS, National Health Service, even those who do not share my Christian convictions, are also disturbed as they see their own freedom of thought and speech being undermined by the judge's ruling. No doctor, researcher, or philosopher can demonstrate or prove that a person can change sex Without intellectual and moral integrity, medicine cannot function, and my 30 years as a doctor are now considered irrelevant compared to the risk that someone else might offend. And they're giving gender-blocking puberty-blocking drugs, strong hormonal drugs that carry serious health risks with them, like Luprone or whatever it's called, to 6-year-olds. And this guy's the problem. Child abusers are allowed to child abuse. I think this is one of the sort of the core issues in the world today, how this is being handled against what science says. Even Bill Maher, has a show on HBO now, and this is from tomorrow's New York Times Magazine. He says this: religions always talk about the one true religion. Now on the left, we have the one true opinion. And it is an opinion. It's not based on fact. Elites against Western civilization. I'll flag just a little bit in this article. It's in the City Journal, which is a great conservative publication that I would highly recommend you to read. Just listen to a couple paragraphs of this article written by Joel Kotkin. The intellectual class across the West, encompassing its universities, media, and the arts, is striving to dismantle the values that paced its ascendancy. Europe, the source of Western civilization, now faces a campaign in academia and elite media to replace its cultural and religious traditions with what one author describes as a multicultural and post-racial republic supportive of separate identities. The European we does not exist, writes French philosopher Pierre Monet. Assessing the damage, European culture is in hiding, disappearing without a soul. The increasingly woke values of the educated upper classes reflect, as Alvin Toffler predicted almost half a century ago, the inevitable consequence of mass affluence, corporate concentration, and the shift to a service economy. The new elite, Toffler foresaw, would abandon traditional bourgeoisie values of hard work and family for more aesthetic goals, self-fulfillment as well as unbridled hedonism. Affluence, he observes, serves as a base from which men begin to strive for post-economic goals. It sounds like it came to a Moriel prophecy conference. This is exactly what the Bible predicted. It is exactly what is going on as we sit and watch it. And it's accelerating and it's converging. So I would highly recommend this. The article is City Journal, city-journal.org, Elites Against Western Civilization, subtitle, Teaching Youth That There Is Nothing Good About Our Democratic Cultural Inheritance. The intellectual class is working to discredit our past and demolish our future. It sounds like the platform of some of the political parties in Canada and the United States. So let me just do, there's the time. So I'll be done in about 10 minutes. Hey. This is an interview this week. Hezbollah, the leader Nasrallah, ended up in Tehran along with Soleimani visiting Khamenei. Soleimani gave an interview, and in the interview he said this. Now listen, I think if you listen to what Soleimani, he's the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Many people consider him to be a military genius. He's very strategic in the way he's implanted people and social services and that type of thing throughout Iraq and Syria and Lebanon, and that's how Iran is extending its influence. It's not just winning on the battlefield. They're doing it underhandedly. They're changing the landscape. They kicked all the Sunnis pretty much out of Syria, and they're being replaced by Shias. So this is an Nicene battle between Shia and Sunni Islam that we see going on in Syria. And Russia's come in and said, well, we're going to help out Iran, we're going to help out Syria and that type of thing. But here's Soleimani. So my thought when I read this was, I think he has not only a math problem, a math deficiency, but also a geographical one. This is a quote from the article. This is published on the official Ayatollah Khamenei website. Therefore, there was a dense presence in a limited area. In Iraq alone, talking about the United States, there were more than 150,000 troops and over 30,000 U.S. militaries were present in Afghanistan. Yet this excluded the coalition forces, which were about 15,000 in Afghanistan. Thus, a 200,000 member specialized and trained force was present in our region next to Palestine. I know a little bit about geography. Iraq and Afghanistan are not next to Palestine. Vancouver is next to the border, but it would be like saying Vancouver is next to New Orleans. That's about the equivalent. That's probably maybe a little bit further. Kansas City, okay? And we know it's not, but this is the mentality of the people that are running this. And so here are some pictures. This is from the Houthis put this up about their attack on Saudi forces in, I think that was across the border in Saudi Arabia. Some of these were Yemen mercenaries. They said they captured thousands. I don't know if that's true, but certainly this was a big deal. This is also another interview that one of the other Iranian people gave. I don't have time to go into that. Here's a little video from 60 Minutes the other night about the attack on the facilities in the Aramco facilities a couple weeks ago. These are security, now it's like nothing is secret anymore, right? Security cameras everywhere. And so they did a little interview with Mohammed bin Salman, and essentially he said, listen, this was stupid for Iran to do, but yet today I see that Saudi Arabia and Iran are talking about patching things up, which is not good news for our government, who's been trying to separate the Sunnis from Iran. So who knows how that's going to go, but this is an article from Lebanon Arabic paper published in, I think it's published in London, and it's talking about sort of what's going on with MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. In Israel, things are still in a bit of turmoil. Netanyahu's pre-indictment hearing was this week. Don't know if he'll be charged or not, formally charged. That has an impact on the elections. The Knesset was sworn in this week. Also at the same time, this is a great article by Jonathan Spire in the Wall Street Journal. Iran opens a second front along Israel's border. They're moving into Iraq. That's why Israel's been attacking Iraq. These are all players in various end time scenarios that we see kind of coming together and playing out in front of us. Jonathan Spire says this in his article: once an Israeli government emerges from coalition wrangling, it will need to confront this new and rising challenge by its doorstep. Aerial bombing won't be enough. France has jumped into this trying to criticizing the fact that we're putting sanctions on Iran. Now, France has sort of a vested interest in that. For a long time, their French energy company, Total, was running the Pars gas field. It's the largest natural gas field on the planet. It's shared between Iran and Qatar in the Persian Gulf. So they broke away from that arrangement, but I think they want to get it back because it's worth billions per year to the French company. In terms of the Israeli election, this was kind of an unusual thing. All of the people on the right wing, all the right-wing parties, have now agreed that they will support Netanyahu all the way through. So it's either Netanyahu gets to be the head of a new unity government with our support, or we go to new elections. And this was a very unusual move because my understanding is that at some point the President Rivlin will say, well, they're not able to get the election done, they're not able to form a majority, And that will give someone 21 days. And the concern was in that 21 days, it would be open season. So people could leave Likud and go over to support the blue and white party and give them a majority, or vice versa. But what Netanyahu was, he's a very good politician. He went out and he got all of the parties on the right to say, we'll support Netanyahu all the way through. This is the scene that took place just yesterday, or the day before, the swearing in of the new Knesset in Israel. Now, they've all been elected to be the Knesset, but they don't have a government yet because there's no one that can form a majority for the prime minister. I believe those empty seats are the Arab bloc parties. Netanyahu did get up and give a bit of a speech, as these are the leaders of the parties that were posing for pictures. And Netanyahu got up and he talked about, we got to get this solved. We got to form a unity government. And then he went on to say, listen, we've got to recognize we are in a very strategically difficult situation. Anyone who knows the details knows the full extent of the truth, but everyone with eyes in his head can see that Iran continually arms itself. Iran consistently becomes stronger. Its boldness, its audacity is consistently navigating. It attacks the national maritime navigation routes. It attacks the Arabian Peninsula. It attacks everywhere. It sends terrorists to every place. It also attacked directly U.S. aircraft and Saudi oil fields, and it declares clearly this is what their general said, including just 2 days ago. Israel will cease to exist. This is a quote. It isn't theory. Israel will cease to exist. They believe this. They pursue this, and we must take them with the utmost seriousness. So that was just a couple days in the Knesset. At the same time this is going on, while that was going on, Vladimir Putin was meeting with King Abdullah of Jordan in Sochi, Russia, the resort city there on the Black Sea. I played in my update a couple weeks ago. You can go look at it. You can look it up on the UN website. Abdullah's speech at the UN a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago now. The man has a very twisted view of history and facts. This is from an Arabic. This is from Al-Quds newspaper today, published in the UK. Essentially what it says is this. They're getting ready to attack Al-Aqsa, meaning Israel, the Jews are getting ready to attack Al-Aqsa. At the same time this is going on, there are riots, pretty serious riots, dozens killed, hundreds injured in Iraq, in Baghdad. Again, this is just part of the generalized turmoil, lawlessness, and that sort of thing that we see everywhere we look around the world. They interviewed some of the people in this and saying, listen, the government is corrupt. We want to get rid of the government. And the government's been very close to Iran, and the people are upset with it. So everywhere you look, there's turmoil. There's turmoil in Saudi Arabia. There's turmoil here, Hong Kong, Europe, all of this. There was a stabbing attack in Paris at a police station the other day by a guy on the way over or while he was there, shouting, Allahu Akbar. Now the French, they're very cracking. They're doing their Inspector Clouseau impressions or acting. They're saying, well, we're going to look at this and see if it might be terrorism. But then it was announced today that they're going to open a terrorism investigation. And finally, I'll close with this. This is a group that just published on Syria, and essentially they're saying Syria is a real mess. I think all of this plays into Bible prophecy, and encourage you to watch Marco, Jacob, myself, as we try to keep people abreast of all this. Pray for us. We do come under rather severe attack at times. There's no other way to say that. And it's hard. You'll get 1,000 likes, and then you wonder why did that one guy vote thumbs down on my video? Who, and my dear wife says, don't worry about that, but I do, and she knows I will. But pray for us, because we are really in a spiritual warfare now. And so what I said last night goes doubly here. Put on the whole armor of God and stand in the power of his might. That's what we need to believe. Father, thank you so much for your word. Thanks for the opportunity to share with these good folks here today in Vancouver. Pray that you will guide us into all truth by your Spirit. Seal our minds, seal our hearts, and keep us ever hopeful of the fact that someday the Lord will return. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.